Good day. Hope all is well in your world. That God bless you for being here today. For our message today, I want to reflect back several weeks ago or months ago. I did a sermon titled Looking Good Internally was the title of it. It was taken from Mike Cope's book, Righteousness Inside Out. And in that lesson, we talked about a girl named Jessica Cohen who writes about a time when she was a student at Yale University. And she came across an ad in the Yale Daily News with the heading, Egg Donor Needed. And a couple was willing to pay $25,000 for a genetically right egg to produce a child from. And here's the description of the ad. They wanted an Ivy League college student who was over 5'5", of Jewish heritage, who had to be athletic, attractive, and with an ACT score of over 1,500. Of course, the $25,000 got Jessica's attention, and she started doing some research. And on the internet, she found one more site with over 500 ads like that. There is an eBay ad for genetic material where people can advertise their goods. And here's a sample of a typical ad that was posted. Hi, my name is Kimberly. I'm 24 years old, 5'11", with blonde hair and green eyes. I previously donated eggs, and the couple was blessed with big twin boys. The doctor told me I had perky ovaries, the most perfect eggs he had ever seen. Some of the literature we've read in the past, Brave New World by Huxley, or some of the songs we've heard in the year 2525, we've comprehended selective reproduction. It's in the future, it appears. We've been actually doing this in the plant and animal kingdom for some time, developing these hybrids. But sometimes it doesn't work out right. With the honeybees, for instance, we were trying to make a better bee, and we came up with this Africanized bee that was deemed the killer bee, and the problems that we had to deal with that selective reproduction. Well, this Jessica Cohen, she pursues this $25,000 and begins correspondence with this anonymous couple. And come to find out, the man and his wife expressed concerns about her scores in math and science, but the process came to an end whenever she sent some pictures of herself. The husband responded, I showed the pictures to my wife this morning. Personally, I think you look great. But she said, ho-hum. But this is the kind of bizarro world in which we live. It's a world that values the outside and the external, looks and athletic ability and power and wealth. It's a world that considers, the gifted and talented, the student with the high IQ, rather than perhaps someone that's compassionate or has courage. But the truth is, this really isn't a new concept. The world in which Jesus came and spoke was basically the same. It was a world where it was easier to define life, even religion, by terms of the external. Whenever Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, he sort of turned everything upside down, or really inside out, like Cope brings out. And he lets us know how things ought to be. While the world is ready to pay top dollar for selective reproduction, I tell you, Jesus is more concerned about the condition of one's heart. Instead of affirming the wealth and the power brokers, he announces God's blessings on who? On those poor in spirit, the mourners, the meek, those who are hungry and thirsty after righteousness, those that he describes in the Beatitudes. And those principles brought out in the Sermon on the Mount, they really go against the core values that we're taught in this world in which we live. And even our religion, it hasn't been very successful in fixing this dilemma. Religion, the very thing that should be an aid to making this transformation, of righteousness inside out, that's always had its problem with externals too. In Matthew 23, Jesus is speaking to the religious leaders of his day. And he says, everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogue. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have people call them rabbi. Now, we've got to be honest enough to not place all the blame on those guys, huh? This is a battle that all of us face constantly. We want others to like us, to think that we're bright and witty, to enjoy our company, in short, to approve of us. The writings of Henry Nouwen are filled with his attempts to break free from this inclination to be a people pleaser. And I suppose his writings ring true to us when he says, for as long as you can remember, you have been a pleaser, depending on others to give you an identity. Could that be us? I want to read that again. For as long as you can remember, you have been a pleaser, depending on others to give you an identity. Jesus makes it clear that kingdom-shaped hearts, we don't worry about titles or impressions or approval. They seek only an audience of God. And so he says, be careful not to do your acts of righteousness in front of others to be seen of them. In our text from Matthew, the 6th chapter, Jesus spotlights this problem in citing 3 examples, and that's what I want us to look at in this lesson today. The first one that Jesus mentions is their propensity for putting price tags on all of their gifts. In verse 2, from Matthew 6, so when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues or in the streets, to be honored by others. In my studies, I came across the fact that Jesus is the only one who used the term hypocrite in the New Testament. And he used it 17 times. In the classical Greek, the term is in reference to an actor, one who is seen on the stage performing, putting on an act. But it came to refer to anybody who practices deceit. Now, we are instructed to be generous, to give to those who are in need. But see, it's the form and the motive that concern Jesus. We are not to be attention seekers. And it goes beyond that, helping those in need. The second example is concerning our prayer life. Verse 5, when we pray, don't be like the hypocrites, those actors, those deceiters. Don't do it to be seen by others. One time I prayed at a Thunder basketball game in front of over 18,000 people. It was kind of amazing what I had to go through for a 15 to 20 second prayer. That's how long they wanted it. The guidelines that I had to follow, arriving 2 hours early at the arena to rehearse, had this handwritten prayer that they had to approve, and of course I wanted to change it at the last minute because the day that I prayed before this game was the same day that a earthquake hit Japan and a tsunami came and devastated the place. And so I wanted to change the prayer. But I don't know what God thinks about prayers like that, with all these rules to go by. I'm grateful that the Thunder pray. I think them and New Orleans are the only 2 professional teams that pray before a basketball game. But that's not the kind of prayer that Jesus encouraged us to make as a priority in our life. He says, you go to your closet and you close the door, and that's where you pray. Well, why pray if nobody knows about it? Why pray in a room with the shades drawn? What's the point? Exactly. They have received their reward in full. They sought the attention, the approval, the accolades of the people, and they had received them. So what other reward would fit? The third illustration of their hypocritical acts of righteousness was their practice of fasting. Verse 16, when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show that they are fasting. I believe that would be a good idea probably if we would do more fasting in our world and in our lives. It's a way to maybe discipline the body so that God can fill us. It could be a healthy way to teach us greater dependence on God. But I'll tell you, it can also become an attention-getting device. When Jesus addresses these guys about doing good things for wrong reasons, he says, you're acting like your forefathers. You go all the way back to Isaiah, the first chapter. The prophet deals with this same mindset of external appearances. And God says, you take your evil deeds out of my sight. The prophet Amos, he dealt with the same thing in his day. And his message was, don't bother singing or praying or giving. God doesn't want a show and tell religion. Instead, we need our hearts broken and restored with an interest in justice. I came across a story about this guy who was driving in rush hour traffic. And he notices this car ahead of him has got this bumper sticker that says, honk if you love Jesus. This guy honks. And sure enough, the guy in the car ahead, he turns around and screams something awful and gestures him, apparently forgetting about the bumper, the external sign he's got on his car calling for good. The challenge for us is to break the world's mold and to try to get better at practicing things according to Jesus' instructions. Let's keep a low profile on works that we do as a church, on the benevolent things that we do, the missions that we are involved in. People are going to know, of course. They will see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Matthew 5:16. But it won't be because we become a publicity firm. Jesus invites us to let our lights shine before men, but not to turn the floodlights on ourselves. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, I come across this guy a lot in my studies. He noticed that too many Christians seem to think that the preacher is on a stage performing, while they, the audience, are being entertained. But he said that's not the flow of true worship at all. See, God is always the only audience, an audience of one. The song leader, he's just a conductor. The members, we are performers. But we perform for him, not to be seen by anybody, and certainly not to congratulate ourselves. And so Jesus advises us to give in a way that our left hand, doesn't know what our right hand is doing. And I've also read where some people have taken this so literal that they've actually sewn a piece of cloth over the collection plate so that their right hand can give without their left hand knowing it. Really? Can a hand see anyway? This thinking misses the point. This is turning into quirky legalism. Every prayer doesn't have to be behind a locked door. The point is, our acts of righteousness are performed for God. But also the point isn't literal secrecy. And yet in a culture where dozens of emails, await us every morning with our phones ringing at every gathering. I've had my cell phone ring twice in my pocket while I've been conducting a funeral service. We've got these voicemails and these Palm Pilots and constant texting. Maybe it wouldn't hurt us to take some of Jesus' words literally, huh? Perhaps in the discipline of secrecy, we might find a way for us to get beyond the noise and the static and hear again the voice of the one calling us. See, perhaps in private, we can remember who called us, and we can reflect on all the gifts that he has showered on us. And we can also remind ourselves that we aren't in this life to win the approval of the world by how we look or how smart we are or what we've accumulated. No. We are playing for an audience of one, and pleasing him is the only thing that matters. May God bless you in your efforts to stop pleasing yourself and start pleasing your God. Later.